listening to Union Strong NJSPBA Voices Podcast. The intro is brought to you by the New Jersey State PBA-owned Federal Credit Union, offering competitive rates and fast loan approval. Visit www.njspbafcu.org. Hello and welcome to episode 46 of Union Strong NJSPBA Voices Podcast. I'm your host, Vinny Rizzo. When we talk about the law enforcement family, we often speak of service, sacrifice, and strength. But there's another side that deserves just as much attention: the healing that comes after tragedy. That's where Garden State C.O.P.S, Concerns of Police Survivors, steps in. This incredible organization is built around a single mission: to support the families and loved ones left behind when an officer makes the ultimate sacrifice. It's a mission born from heartbreak, but fueled by compassion, resilience, and a deep commitment to making sure no survivor ever walks alone. Today we're joined by someone who knows this journey all too well: Garden State C.O.P.S President Lisa Preslar. Lisa didn't choose this path. It was chosen for her the day that her husband, Lakewood, New Jersey patrolman William Nichie Preslar, was killed in the line of duty on May 14th, 2007. In that single devastating moment, her world changed forever. But from that loss, Lisa found both strength and purpose. She became involved with Garden State C.O.P.S not only to help her own family navigate grief, but to ensure that every other survivor who faces this unimaginable reality has a place to turn for comfort, guidance, and hope. Garden State C.O.P.S provides peer support, counseling resources, retreats, and connections that allow survivors to lean on one another. It's about community, but also about rebuilding lives, finding ways to carry forward the memories of those we've lost while still moving ahead with strength and purpose. Lisa's leadership and her story remind us that behind every name etched on a memorial is a family that continues to live, love, and fight for healing. And thanks to organizations like Garden State C.O.P.S, they don't have to do it alone. So today, as we hear from Lisa, let's not only honor the memory of her husband Nichie, but also recognize the resilience of every survivor and the vital work of Garden State C.O.P.S. Together, they show us that even in the darkest moments, there is light, there is family, and there is hope. We hope you enjoy this powerful episode. So Lisa, can you tell us about your background and how you became involved with C.O.P.S?
Yes. So my husband was a Lakewood police officer. He had been on the job about 6 years, and May 14th, 2007, he was in a motor vehicle accident and he was instantly killed. And then I got that knock on my door that no police officer's family ever wants to receive. And they were there to tell me that he had been killed in a motor vehicle accident earlier that morning. And my first thought, of course, was, how do I tell these children? Our kids were 4 and 5 at the time. And,
Obviously, we heard it in the monologue. This is going to be for you and for our listeners, but obviously for you, based on that first response, an emotional episode. And I've heard you speak many times on the microphones at conventions, and we had our little pre-show meeting, and I was honest with you about your authenticity and how raw and vulnerable you are when you speak. And I'm really happy that you're on today and going to afford our listeners that aren't presidents or delegates or go to conventions. I'm glad they're going to be able to hear you and your story, and I'm looking forward to this. So appreciate that first response, and we're going to build off of that, and we're going to keep it moving. So for our listeners who may not be familiar, what is the mission of Concerns of Police Survivors, and what does the organization provide for survivors?
Okay, so Concerns of Police Survivors is a national organization, and Garden State C.O.P.S, Garden State Concerns of Police Survivors, is New Jersey's chapter. So we provide peer support to the surviving family members and affected coworkers of officers killed in the line of duty. So when my husband was killed, I started getting phone calls from Garden State C.O.P.S saying, hey, we're here to help you. And honestly, my initial thought was, who are these people and what do they want? You know, my world has just fallen apart. And they were there telling me that they're going to help me and hold my hand through this. And they were. You know, they were there at his funeral, at the services, and for months afterwards. And they became a very, very valuable organization to myself and my children.
That's very powerful. I mean, obviously, you were dealing with the worst thing to ever imagine, and probably the worst event that you ever experienced and hope to ever experience. You had that skepticism, right? But they were there for you, and I'm sure as days turned to weeks, turned to months, turned to years, obviously you're going to get into it a little bit more, but they became a mainstay in your life.
Absolutely. You know, I was like, all right, let me just take this phone call. And this woman just said one thing to me, and I was like, oh, wait, I'm sorry, what did you say? And, you know, my sister's married to a police officer. We have friends who are officers, and no one got what we were going through. And just one thing she said, I was like, you know what? There's something to this organization, and this woman knows what I'm going through. And from then we just started attending local events. And, you know, when I went to that first Christmas party, and my then 5-year-old said to me, Mommy, do you see that little girl over there? And I'm like, yeah. She goes, she doesn't have a daddy either. That was huge. You know, we have friends at home. We live in a small little town. Nobody was going through anything close to what we were going through. We didn't even have friends, luckily, that had a divorce situation. Everybody had a mommy and daddy in our world, you know, and that was very hard for my children. Hard for me, but hard for me to see my children go through that. You know, we're at soccer and I'm screaming like a nut because I'm like, I'm cheering for mom and dad. And then they would say, oh, is your dad coming to your game? And they would have to say, no, they're not. But just COPS just was that place for us where we felt, for lack of a better word, normal.
So I guess it's safe to say that being, again, family that was married to a police officer, you being married to a police officer, you had no idea about COPS until that tragic day, correct? Like you had never heard about it. Is that safe to say?
Yes, but I do have a funny story for that.
Go ahead.
So I used to do nails, you know, cosmetologist, and this woman came in. She was married to an officer from New Jersey, and she says, hey, we're doing this fundraiser for COPS. That's what she said, COPS. She says, I'm
so
selling
like,
these little, whatever.
Yeah.
COPS is police to me,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So she says, we're selling these rubber bracelets. It says COPS on it. I'm like, all right, I'll take 4. Now, my husband was not a jewelry person. He wore his watch to work. That's about it. So fast forward a year later, my husband is killed. And one of the pictures that they were running, because he was also on the entry team, was him, and it said Lakewood SWAT, and he had his arm up. Someone was helping him adjust something on his gear. And I looked, I'm like, what is on his wrist? And it was that blue rubber bracelet.
Wow.
And I'm like, why does he have that on? It just dawned on me. And when we were cleaning out his car after he had passed, in the cup holder was this little rubber bracelet that said COPS on it. Again, nothing. It wasn't until I started getting involved and someone handed me, hey, we have these little bracelets. I'm like, I know that bracelet. I have that bracelet. Yeah. You know, I was like, that is a little weird.
Yeah, sometimes
right?
There's like a bigger, more powerful reason for something. I don't know. Sometimes you just can't even explain things.
No, and that was like so weird, you know, because I never made the connection. Yeah, very strange.
Well, the reason why I asked is obviously you were kind of in the know, you know, being a police spouse and having family that was involved, and you didn't really know about COPS. So hopefully this episode, people are going to hear about COPS and not just correlate that to the profession, you know, police officers, COPS, and kind of really understand what you've gone through with this tragedy, how you've grown, how it's hopefully helped your family moving forward. And maybe we'll afford people the opportunity to get involved, make a donation to help the mission and things like that. So that's the whole purpose of this episode, and, you know, bring some light to the organization and to really, really tragic events in this profession that unfortunately, as we walk out the door, you never know what's going to happen, but that there are people like yourself and organizations like this that help, you know, mend it and heal it a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And our chapter cannot thank the state PBA enough. You guys are so generous to us, give us every opportunity to support and be there. And you guys have just been amazing to us. So we thank you for giving us this time.
Of course. Do you know anything historically about the Garden State chapter? Like, was there an inspiration or a founding moment that created it? And if so, or if not, just how has our Garden State chapter grown over the years?
Okay, so Garden State C.O.P.S was founded in 1998 by a surviving spouse who had attended her first police week in D.C. So National Peace Officers Memorial Day is May 15th.
Yep.
Okay, nationally. So she went down, took part in the events of Police Week, met with concerns of police survivors, and said, this group is amazing. We need one in our state. And she came home and started our chapter.
All right.
You know, and sadly it has grown, unfortunately, because it grows because we have more survivors. But it's an amazing organization, and they just do so much for survivors.
Definitely. That was a nice little overview of the organization and your personal background. So we're going to dive into it a little bit more, you know, just in terms of the support for survivors and things like that. These are going to be a little bit more pointed. And again, we appreciate your authenticity and your vulnerability and providing these little sound bites for our listeners. So, you know, what are some of the unique challenges faced by families of fallen officers?
First, it's a very public death, right? So it's in the media. I remember they had to put police officers in front of my house to keep the media away when my husband passed. So it's being very public. These families don't know what to do now. Like, how do I pick up the pieces? I myself didn't even know what day to put the garbage can out. So this seems so minor, but at the time they're like, those are huge things. My husband's department was amazing, but we were Lakewood's second line of duty. The first one was in 1947, which was small. Weird coincidence. It's my sister-in-law's grandfather. Yeah. So when my husband passed, they were like, we're not really sure. We've never done this before, but we're going to figure it out together. So with concerns of police survivors stepping up and helping us understand how the pension works as far as a line of duty and how things are handled there and what benefits are available for the families. You know, it was a learning process for Lakewood, unfortunately, also because, well, fortunately, actually, they've never dealt with a line of duty. So you just don't know. I remember when the chief finally came to my house that day and he looked at me, he's like, Lisa, I had a 4-year-old kid on my hip, still in pajamas at 2:30 in the afternoon. And he comes in, he's like, Lisa, I'm so sorry. And I was just like, remember these weird things. I'm like, what are we going to do for health coverage? We need health coverage. Like, what's going to happen to us? It's weird, those things that do run through your head. And it's weird, the things that stick out in your head too. Like that, I remember asking the chief about health coverage. That's the last thing that should have been on my mind. But I was already in that mode, like, how am I going to take care of these kids? He was the breadwinner. He provided our health coverage. Now, what are we going to do?
Of course.
Like, what are we going to do? Like, the rug was literally pulled out from underneath us, and people were amazing. My house was full of people, police, everything. And my youngest daughter then said to me, she goes, are we having a party? I'm like, no, but people were coming in, bringing food, being supportive. I'm like, no, we're not having a party, but just everybody's coming because they feel bad what happened. Like when you think about what the little kids process and stuff.
Well, before we turn these microphones on, we were talking. So your kids were 5 and 4, you said?
Yeah, just 4 and 5, yes.
Yeah, 4 and 5. So, my kids are 8 and 6. Mm-hmm. So a couple of years ago, that's the ages they were at. So sure. I couldn't imagine, you're dealing with being mom to them. And obviously they're not teenagers, which come with their own set of issues, or young adults where they could kind of be on their own. You're still having to take care of them and navigate again, like when does the garbage have to go out? How am I going to pay this bill? How am I going to take them to the well visit? Mm-hmm. So you were dealing with it and you were in the thick of it. So that was just your brain dumping like, hey, I got to figure this out. And luckily you had support and a support system to get you through. Yeah,
thank God. We really did. And, I remember even like that day, all of a sudden I just looked and my kids are bathed and I looked at my friend. I was like, thank you. Sure. My neighbor just came over one day. I'm like, what is that noise? I look over and the teenage kid across the street's cutting the grass. Yeah. And I come out and I start crying. He goes home. He's like, Ma, I made her cry. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. And I'm like, no, it was a great gesture, But through all that with family and friends, nobody really got it. Until we started coming around and being part of Garden State C.O.P.S, for lack of a better word, we were normal with them because everybody was experiencing that kind of loss.
So you just mentioned like the pension planning aspect of it where they help guide you with that. How does the organization help families navigate other things in that immediate aftermath of a line of duty death?
So right from the beginning, we take our cues from the family. I'll reach out to the state PBA and I'm like, hey, can you get me a contact at the PD so I can start talking to them, help guide them, help them to help the families if they haven't dealt with this before. And we'll reach out to the families. I've sat on a notification for a family. That was extremely hard. And then some people are like, no, I'm fine. But we will try and get initially with the PD, with the families before the services, but we are always at the services. And I hear about peer support, but until I actually witnessed it, like I've walked up, I'm waiting my turn, and I approach a widow, and they'll say, oh, so-and-so, this is Garden State C.O.P.S. They're here to help the families. And they're like, going through the motions. And when I look at that spouse and I take her by the hand and I said, I'm a surviving spouse. I also lost my husband. Like that connection, like the change. I've walked up and said, here, this is a mom. Here's a mom, and brought them together. And I just the connection they immediately make, like, all right, this is another mom who's lost their child with another spouse. Like all of a sudden, like, oh, wait, who are you? Where are you from? It like catches your attention, and to be able to witness that and be part of that is amazing. And then we will say, these are the possible benefits. Once you get that line of duty determination through the pension and stuff like that, then this is where we'll guide you. And we are very fortunate that we also have college for the children from the Price of Honor law enforcement license plates. And, it's like you meet these families, and now I feel like we're at that point now, all these kids are starting to go to college. So I'm like, if they're not part of the chapter, they're coming around again, and it's nice to hear that people are doing well. And now I'm going to help you with your kids' college. And it's a lot of information, but it's also just experience. I've been there. I've walked this road, and let me help you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a road that you probably never wanted to be on, but when you hit that fork and obviously your life took you this way, it shows the type of person you are, your family that you've raised, to be able to be so involved with this organization, to advocate and help people that unfortunately, like you said, that number is going to grow.
Yeah.
That wall down in DC grows, and it's an unfortunate thing. But again, this organization, this chapter is huge, and it's a testament to you and the people that are surrounding you as well. So I know it's probably an understatement to say that you're proud to be involved in this organization despite
Absolutely.
that, that path that you had to unfortunately take. Are there any specific programs or events that you're especially proud of that support survivors?
Yes, one of our biggest events and most attended is our annual bus trip to, like you mentioned, the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in D.C. This event is sponsored by the state PBA. We run 2 buses full of survivors, and a lot of survivors will go to Police Week. That first year their officer is honored. They'll see their name on that wall for the first time, and they'll go through like the candlelight vigil and all those things. But we run this bus trip, and it's open to first year survivors. So we kind of give them a little introduction of what Police Week's going to be like, let them see the wall. But this bus trip is very, very important to our older survivors, people who can't get to DC. It's been a couple years since they've had their loss, and they want to go and stay connected and hang with other survivors on the bus and stuff like that, and go down to the memorial. So that bus trip is like really huge. And then part of what our chapter does, so we are New Jersey's chapter of Concerns of Police Survivors. Concerns of Police Survivors holds Cops Kids Camp every summer, Young Adults Camp, Adult Children's, Parents, Spouses Retreat. They have these retreats/weekends all throughout the year. And what we do is help facilitate people to get to these events, and then all the money and stuff that is raised or donated to us, we reimburse survivors for their airfare. We'll reimburse our survivors to attend Police Week that first year that their officer is honored. All these events like the bus trip, and then we have our golf outing, and we have a holiday party. We've had picnics. We do a Monmouth track event. We do Survivor Day at Breakwater Beach down in Seaside Park. All of these events, some are fundraisers, but the majority of them are just to get our survivors together, let that peer support happen naturally, but most importantly, let them know that we have not forgotten them. Importantly, we have not forgotten them, but we have not forgotten their officer or their ultimate sacrifice they made. And keeping people connected like that does help with the grieving process, because there's always somebody who has been in a situation dealing with what you're dealing with, and they always want to help and always want to hear. So these events, and then with the programs that National C.O.P.S puts on, they're very, very important for survivors. And, I always say to someone, just try it. See, if you don't like it, you don't have to go back. I didn't like going to camp and sleeping in a bunk bed in the woods of Wisconsin, but my kids thrived there.
Sure.
And I secretly miss it. At the time I didn't. I'm like, But all of these events and or programs, I've witnessed myself personally, and then just watching other people go through it, how important these things are, and keeps you connected to other survivors, keeps you connected to law enforcement, which is important.
You rattled off 1,000,001, it seems, programs and events. I don't think near 50 episodes into this Union Strong podcast, people are sitting with a paper and pen, listening to me and taking notes, and listening to you and taking notes. So that being said, everything you rattled off, is there a general area where people could find that? Would it be the GardenStateCops.org website? Is everything listed there?
Yep. All of our events and programs are on there. There's links to national cops. Yeah.
Okay, so in the show notes, Garden State C.O.P.S, commonspelling.org, we'll have everything there. I'll make an easy clickable link, and it can navigate, and you could learn about all these programs, contact informations, the whole 9 yards.
Yep.
Again, the biggest thing today is we are bringing all this to light in a way that's never been presented digitally, and people are going to learn and hopefully get more involved. That's the big thing about
thank
today.
you.
Of course.
Yeah, this is a subject that nobody wants to talk about, right?
Sure.
Nobody wants to talk about deceased police officers, you know? And I think sometimes that people see us, they'll be walking by our table, and you can tell they look, oh, keep walking. It's not a comfortable subject, but, you know, unfortunately, we do have to have these conversations.
Well, I'm grateful that, unfortunately, my local only has had one line of duty death. Chris Goodell.
Yes.
Episode 38 on this podcast, I interviewed his sister. We kind of had that survivor's perspective. This is obviously your perspective as well, but obviously also advocating for Garden State C.O.P.S and what they provide. I have a connection to this because of that, best friend growing up. So I get it. It's a tough conversation, but you know what? The energy in this room, it's powerful. And I hope it kind of comes across these sound waves and people are going to feel that. And you know what? Sometimes it's tough to have a conversation, but those tough conversations are like that saying, anything in life that's easy isn't worth anything. I feel like this is powerful, and I hope it's well received, and I'm sure it will be. And again, we're bringing a lot of this information to light that people might necessarily never would have heard in the first place, or not wanted to have a conversation or listen about, but I think it's going to be huge moving forward for sure. All right, so you just gave us an overview again about the specific programs and events that you're especially proud of. Can you kind of paint a picture about what National Police Week is all about, like that experience, and what it means for survivors to be down in DC?
So the National Peace Officers Memorial is May 15th. It is in the middle of a very busy week down in D.C. You first start with the Police Unity Tour riding in on the 12th. The Candlelight Vigil is the 13th, where every officer that was killed across the United States in the previous year is mentioned in the roll call. As far as survivors, Concerns of Police Survivors has things at the host hotel where it's like you have debriefings and support, and the kids can go to a daycare or kids programs. I specifically went into a spouses group that was for accidental. COPS tries to gear your loss and your survivor status into a debriefing and or a group counseling session. They have speakers, they have some entertainment and stuff. They do have a blue gala that COPS also puts on. Then you have the Peace Officers Memorial on the 15th. And just being around other survivors, but seeing the amount of law enforcement that does come down and support the families. And if you've never been to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial, it's a beautiful, beautiful site with all of our officers who have been killed in line of duty, all their names on the wall. But during Police Week, it's just such a beautiful tribute. People will leave memorial things there and pictures and letters, and it's just an amazing thing to see. As sad as it is, the way law enforcement comes together with the survivors to be there for each other and support each other and honor this ultimate sacrifice that our officers made. I mean, they just went to do their job, and sadly they did not make it home that day. And this affects the families, but it affects the departments. Many officers struggle with that loss too. It's just an amazing, very hard week though. You come home, you are mentally exhausted, but it's just wonderful days of remembrance and honoring. And I go every year, and I missed it once, and I was really sad not to be there. As sad as it can be to be there, but it's also just an amazing thing to experience. And I highly recommend that a police officer, you make it there sometime, because you hear about it, but to see it for your own eyes and experience it is something so different. And at that candlelight vigil, when they light that one candle And within a matter of minutes, it just spreads.
Yeah.
And everybody's just quiet, holding a candle. And it's like, you just feel so supported and part of something way bigger than yourself.
That's true. I mean, the energy kind of changed a little bit in the room the last couple of minutes. Powerful. It's, again, I've said the same adjectives a couple of times in this episode. You're raw right now. You're vulnerable. And again, this is not an easy conversation. Some of our listeners are going to hear that. Some of our listeners might be a surviving spouse or sibling or parent, and maybe they're not ready to do that yet. But we're hopeful that this might push you over the edge a little bit to go and experience this and realize that your loved one is never forgotten. We're there, like you said, in that glow of candles, remembering every single one that made that ultimate sacrifice. And again, in those breakout rooms, sharing similar stories and scenarios, unfortunately, of those horrible days. But again, that's what this is all about. It's about growing and kind of advocating for one another and helping each other be a little bit better tomorrow than they were the day before. And if you hit that little bit of a roadblock because you are sad or depressed, getting you through it and getting you the help or the assistance you may need to help guide you moving forward. I mean, I think that's kind of what we're trying to do here. And hopefully Lisa's response sort of summed that up. And again, sometimes a little stutter or a sigh or, a gap in words is more powerful than a run-on sentence like I'm doing right now. She's real here, and she's the creme de la creme advocate for this organization and for survivors. And we're grateful to have her here and have her on and sharing her story in general and talking about this organization and all the programs that they do provide to our survivors. So thank you again. It means a lot, honestly. Before we get back to the conversation, I want to take a moment to talk to you about the sponsor of this mid-roll, something that's here for you because it's ours. Blue Guardian Insurance is NJSPBA owned and designed with our members in mind. That means it's not just another insurance company. It's run by the people who understand our work, our families, and our needs. Whether it's protecting your home, your car, or your future, Blue Guardian has your back because it's built for us, by us. If you haven't already, check them out at www.pbainsure.com and see how they can help protect what matters most. Blue Guardian Insurance, our protection, our way.
Well, I really appreciate you having me here. And, the breaks in my voice. And listen, I can talk about my husband and different things and not get upset. But when I talk about this organization, as cliche as it sounds, I don't know where my family would be without this organization.
Sure.
They were there for us in the worst of times, but they're also there for us in the best of times. We have the parties, and when we get together, we're not all sitting around crying. That's not what it's about. And I think sometimes people think that, and when they hear me get emotional in my voice, it's just that strangers stepped up and were there for my family. And these strangers became friends, and these friends became Blue family.
Sure.
You think, all right, I have my family, and I do. I have an amazing family, but nobody understood. And being part of this organization has just really helped my children grow. And what I am doing, as far as I'm just paying it forward. Somebody did this for me.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes in life, like something so simple could be so hidden. Like, unless you're dealing with what you dealt with, it's easy for them to be like, I hear you, like, I understand, but you don't until you've dealt with what you're dealing with. Like that, like, aha moment of like being in a room with another spouse that lost her husband. I can't relate to you. I could console you and give you a hug, but I can't relate to you like you can with somebody that's dealing exactly with that. And that moment, like you said, you've experienced is so powerful and probably is so beneficial in that healing process to be amongst legitimate peers that unfortunately have been dealt the same hand that you have been dealt with.
Yeah.
There is something to be said about that.
No, absolutely. And when we've had something go on and I'm like, well, they don't know. They just don't know, or they don't get it. And then I'm always like, but you know what? Good for them that they don't get it. Because I wouldn't wish this on anybody, And I always will try and make an excuse for somebody. Well, they're grieving too. They're in a different place, which being part of COPS, and my kids will joke, I'm like Dr. Lisa or now psychologist Lisa, because I always have like a little thing to say, and they're like, but it's because when you're around things and you hear different things and what people are going through and how we call them the mentals, because there's always somebody there at COPS who's got the voice of reason and help you explain what you're going through, whatever. When you're around then you start to hear it, you say, listen, all right, that was insensitive what they said, or this, that, or the other thing. But you're saying, you know what? They're also grieving. They're also hurting. And you see these little things like always just be kind. Like you never know what someone's going through. And like I said, when you experience something like this, it makes you look at the world differently, people differently.
No, I appreciate, again, just kind of the way you come across, and I hope our listeners appreciate it as well, and I'm sure they will. Lisa, are there any upcoming events or programs you'd like to highlight for our listening group?
Well, we just had our 4th annual Black and Blue Ball. If you weren't there, you missed out on a great evening. This is a fun event for our survivors, and it's a lot of work, but it's a fun night. But what is coming up is Survivor Golf Classic, and that is hosted by the Mercer County Conference of PBAs. It's something that our chapter had started, our golf outing. It's out at Mercer Oaks. It's September 30th. We started this golf outing, and it just became too much. And I was at convention in AC, and a good friend of mine, Pat Papero, walked up to me. He's like, when's golf? I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to give it up. And he was like, what? And he says, I'll be back. And within 45 minutes, Mercer County was taking over our golf outing and has made it an extremely successful event. It's one of our top fundraisers for our chapter, so that's coming up. And we're just coming out of all of our COPS kids camps and kids programs, and September starts spouses and then parents. So all these retreats are starting to come up for our survivors. And again, our chapter will reimburse our survivors for all these events. But right now, golf is next on the agenda.
Yeah, so we're about 18 days away from the event. And the registration deadline is a few days from now, September 15th. If you go on to that aforementioned GardenStateCops.org website, and or the New Jersey State PBA website events page, it will take you to the brochure with all the information you would need, whether you want to purchase a foursome, a cart sponsor, or any kind of a donation. All the information is there. Please, please, please consider to make a donation. I know it's cliche to say, no dollar amount is too small. It's a beautiful course. It is a great event. We look forward to it every single year. We hope that the weather gods are in our favor. But again, you guys are all things golf right now. The Survivors Golf Classic is next in line. So again, check out those brochures and please consider making a donation. So obviously this has been a positive episode and a lot of positivity and whatnot. There are going to be challenges and triumphs that the organization has to deal with. What are some of the biggest challenges the organization faces in supporting survivors and raising awareness?
This is a topic nobody wants to talk about. Nobody wants to talk about fallen officers, but we are very fortunate that we have a very good board. We have a very active chapter. So our survivors always know they have some place to come to. So that I think is good. It's just the topic of fallen officers. It's unfortunately the reality, and people don't want to have that conversation. So I think that is like a stumbling block for us, because as soon as we walk up to our table, whether we're at convention or wherever we're at, they look at the sign and see what it says and they want to go the other way. So getting that topic going, and thankfully we have the opportunity at the conventions and stuff to speak and everything. They're a captive audience. They can't walk away. They have to kind of listen. And we just hope that they never have to know anything about our organization or have to deal with us, but know that we're there for them.
So obviously we've kind of touched on it a little bit so far. You know, we're having a tough conversation right now. This isn't an easy conversation. But in this digital media world, the PBA was at the forefront of starting a podcast. And we're right at the forefront of the 21st century, having these tough conversations for thousands upon thousands of listeners to listen to. You know, we had episode 28 of this podcast where we're trying to break the stigma on mental health. You know, you think that was an easy conversation?
No.
Again, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever it would be, do you think in general we'd be talking about mental health in a squad room, let alone on the sound waves of a podcast that everybody can listen to. So again, this isn't an easy conversation to have, but we're having it. And if we run this back next year and we want to talk about it again, it might be a little bit easier to talk about next time than right now. But we're having the conversation. It's a great conversation. It's a powerful conversation. And that's all we can do. And I think the majority of our listeners are going to feel exactly the same way.
So one thing I would like to touch on is Concerns of Police Survivors has all of these camps and retreats for surviving family members. But they also offer, and it's really growing, is they have an affected coworkers retreat.
Oh, interesting.
It's a weekend. You travel on a Friday, it's Saturday and Sunday, and you travel home on a Monday.
Very interesting.
The difference with this retreat is they have you wear these little lanyards, which is great because you meet so many people. You're like, oh, what was her name? I remember her from camp or spouses, whatever. But as far as it'll say my name, where I'm from, and I'm a spouse, and the year I lost my officer. As far as affected coworkers, it is just your name.
Interesting.
You know, it's anonymous because, like you said, nobody wants to talk about these things. And when I talk to families and they unfortunately don't have the connection to the police department, which it does happen, I always say, listen, they're grieving too. But I've also witnessed some officers who are really struggling, and nobody wants to have these conversations.
Like you said, I mean, we're being redundant, but sometimes you have to drive home a point. This isn't like an easy conversation to have. And I'm glad you brought that up because, you know, we're touching on the survivors, the spouse, the parent, the sibling, the child. Yeah, you had that blue family,
yes.
you know, the squad mate, the person that was working that night, the administration that has to navigate things. Everybody is suffering in one way or another. So it's actually great that they offer a program like that. Is that also on the website?
It's on nationalconcernsofpolicesurvivors.org, their website, under survivors, and they'll have all the retreats and stuff.
I'll make sure I put that in the show notes also, because again, being in the know and being a police officer, I didn't realize. And that's actually kind of interesting because, you know, I remember when Chris was killed, I remember midnight shifts. I'd sit there and I'd be on like Facebook and I'd like scroll through like looking at his pictures.
Yes.
And it was just, you know, those nights are awfully quiet when that radio's not going off. And in a sleepy town in Bergen County, sometimes nights were like that. So it was rough. And like you said, you just kind of push through and it gets a little bit quote unquote easier, but does it?
It does get easier, but it's just always there. It's like lingering in the background.
So can you share a story or a moment that has been particularly meaningful to you during your time with cops?
Oh, there's way, way, way too many.
The microphone is all yours. Take your time.
Just like I've said, that peer support, bringing that introduction, mom to mom, another spouse to another spouse. Like I've walked up to women at their husband's viewing and they're like, hi. And then I'm like, I'm a spouse. Like just to see that connection is amazing. But to be there for people, you know how many times I get that text or phone call, I am so sorry to bother you. I'm like, you're not bothering me. What is it? I have a question about this. My kids are getting older. They have something for college. And on my Facebook page personally, I will put my children's milestones or different things that are happening in our lives and stuff. And I think it's been a privilege for me to be part of this organization and a president to be able to help people in the same way someone else helped me. So it's just a privilege. But I did recently receive a very long text after I had posted about my youngest daughter. My girls are now 24 and 22. She graduated from college and just so proud. Here's a bunch of pictures of what's going on in our life. And I received this text from a spouse who said, we haven't been in contact a lot, but anytime I ever reached out or asked you a question, you were always there to answer it. And she went on to explain how just seeing my kids at their sports event, we got a driver's license, we're going to prom, college, high school graduation. She said to me that that gave her like hope that like my kids are going to be okay too. And that is an accumulation of so many things like that. And it's not me talking myself up. It's just me helping someone the way someone else helped me. And for someone to say that to me, because sometimes this gets tough. This is not always easy. You know, you try and do the right thing, say the right thing, and sometimes I don't. But it's always generally from the heart and everything. And when somebody will say to me, you know what, thank you. You know, by your example of how, you know, you pushed on and kept doing with your kids, that's given me hope that I can do this too. And one of my favorites, so National C.O.P.S, every year they'll have a theme. It'll be like healing hearts or finding hope or strangers become friends, friends become family. So one of my favorites is, and it always does get me very emotional, is take my hand and I will lift you up. And that is like I think the best motto for C.O.P.S is just somebody's there to help you at your worst time.
Sure.
Sorry.
No, please don't say sorry. I'm actually so grateful you answered that question the way you did. I was asking for a story or a moment, and I always make
There's too many, yeah.
I always make a joke. I'm glad when people are defiant and don't answer my questions the quote-unquote right way. I'm glad you answered it that way and kind of summed up, like you said, the epitome of what this organization is and what this family is all about and how you handle everything. So thank you. Thank you for that. And I speak on behalf of the thousands of listeners. Thank you to them as well, because they're going to feel exactly what I just felt sitting here a few feet from you. All right. So obviously this episode has touched on your perspective as the president of the chapter and Garden State C.O.P.S in general and the national concerns of police survivors as well. What can we, law enforcement officers and or departments, do for survivors in general?
So as far as survivors go, we all want that connection with the departments. My husband's department has been amazing. They've shown up for graduations and proms, and anytime I've needed them, they've been there. But I do hear from so many other survivors, and not just in our own state. I've been to camp. We have friends from California, Wisconsin, Texas, what have you. It's a lot of the same thing you will hear when survivors say that they've lost the connection with the department. And I understand the department is grieving also, but for survivors, it is important to keep that connection with the police department. You know, it doesn't mean you have to be all there all the time, but just recognizing the end of watch date. You know, just, hey, little card, Merry Christmas, or thinking of you at this time of year, checking in once in a while. Is there anything you guys need? I myself was like, when this happened to me, I was like, oh, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to handle it. This was the one thing I can control that was happening in my life that went out of control. And I tried to be that strong person, and I got this. But there were a lot of times when I did need some help, and just someone, it didn't change your situation, but just, hey, how you doing? Just want to check in. Is there anything you guys need? My kids, when I would go to convention and I would say, hey, I need you to come help me. I need you to help me sell shirts or do this or that. They didn't realize that I was keeping them. They just thought they were cutting school to help me sell T-shirts for Garden State C.O.P.S, you know. But what I was doing was keeping my children connected to law enforcement. I wanted to make sure that they saw the positive side of law enforcement, because unfortunately, only the negative is put out there, right? Yeah. You know, only the negative. And then they'll hear their friends. And I wanted to make sure that just because their officer, their father was not in their life, that they had the connection to law enforcement. And they got to know their father through his coworkers and through being around other officers. Of
course.
You know, so that connection to the families is important. It's not easy. I will tell you that right off the bat. It's not easy always. And we're not going to cry all the time. Like, my kids loved when his coworkers would tell funny stories. Oh my gosh, I have to tell you about your father and the time we had a sheep or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like these, and my kids want to hear that because he's not here to tell them.
Of course.
You know, and I recognize it's not easy. Law enforcement, you're grieving too. But just that connection to the families and having that connection, I saw what it does for my children positively, but then I've also saw, unfortunately, what it's for families who don't have that.
That's a great little tidbit. And again, sitting a few feet across from you, being a law enforcement officer, I think it was really great to hear. And sometimes you need to hear the tough things. So I hope that people share the same sentiments as me, to do those little things that you might not necessarily think of, or maybe that you're sort of dreading this date coming up. And I'm not going to reach out to Lisa because I don't want to bother her. I don't want to bring it up. Mm-hmm. No, send that text, send that card.
Absolutely.
It's going to help her and it's going to help you as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So again, I've said it a couple of times already in this episode. This has been powerful. There's been tears. There's been chuckles. There's been a lot of good information, a lot of valid information. So we're going to start summing this up and bringing it all together. So Lisa, how can listeners get involved or support the work of the Garden State chapter of C.O.P.S?
So like you said, you mentioned our website and stuff. All our events and stuff are on that page. We're always looking for someone to help set up events, attend events, and anybody can attend our events. It's not just open to law enforcement or survivors.
Okay.
Our ball, the golf outing, even just coming to help and volunteer for that day, make a donation if we have like a gift basket auction, anything like that is always huge.
That makes sense. Again, I just said it a couple of minutes ago. For the majority of our listeners that aren't going to have a connection to a line of duty death or be the spouse or significant other or whatever that title is, that unfortunate title, help them out. This is a great organization run by people that unfortunately were sort of thrown into this life. Help out. You don't need to be a survivor. You don't need to be even a law enforcement officer. Help out if you want to just be a volunteer and feel like you did good for a weekend or at an event. Help out. Go to the website where all the links will be in the show notes and get involved. And again, that doesn't have to also mean monetarily, but it can mean that as well.
Yes, and any and all donations that is made to Garden State C.O.P.S, it's spent on our survivors. Like I said, we will reimburse you for all your traveling for all these retreats that National C.O.P.S puts on, and then all of our events and stuff, the holiday party, and all of that money is spent on our survivors. We are all volunteers on our board. Like I said, we are all survivors who have lost an officer, and nobody gets a paycheck. It's a volunteer situation. So
no, that's great.
Yeah, our money is spent solely on survivors.
Great information right there. So are there any new initiatives or goals for the chapter that you're excited about for the future?
Yes, we just found out that we will be hosting in the fall of 2026 Traumas of Law Enforcement put on by National C.O.P.S. So it's open to law enforcement, and we'll be hosting that in New Jersey. So we're really looking forward to that. It's like 3 or 4 days of just all kinds of incidents, like how to prepare for an event of a line of duty. They have great guest speakers. So we're really, really excited about Traumas of Law Enforcement coming to New Jersey 2026 fall. We're actively trying. Our goal is to bring in more survivors to be part of the board and to be involved. I'm hoping that now all these kids that were so young when they lost their officer, now, they're finishing college and they're getting older. And we need that younger thought process. And one of the things that we're really trying to bring back is our state memorial service. That's another big goal. That stopped after COVID for obvious reasons. And we just haven't had that brought back. And, New Jersey was the first state to have a memorial service. And now we haven't had one since COVID.
It's a shame.
It is a shame because if you lost your officer, that was a good place to go. The roll call for New Jersey is read there. It was a good way to go, not get too involved, but go and honor your officer.
But it's kind of like what you were saying, sort of like that text or the card on a holiday or the end of watch date. Mm-hmm. Just because it's not for everybody doesn't mean that shouldn't be happening. And the people that want to be there, it's a huge honor to be there to hear it, and it's powerful. It should be happening.
It should. So we're really trying to advocate to try and get that back.
No, definitely. So I was sitting here sort of chuckling as you were explaining about the new initiative, that fall of 26. That's what we call in the radio podcast world a tease. Your voice was great. I'm like, I'm going to bring Lisa on to be like my little sidekick here, and we're going to turn this into a co-host situation. Any other information
You'll
about
regret
that?
Yeah.
It's all right. It sounds good in the moment. Yeah. Do you have any other details, like a location, or is that literally just a broad sort of tease, like I just said, or do you have more information about that?
No, we are working on solidifying the location and stuff.
Worry.
There's some criterias and stuff for it.
It's all good. We got a little tease, and it's coming to a conference room near you in the fall of 2026.
You got it.
So, Lisa, this has been great, honestly. It's been an honor to sit here and talk to you for an hour. Just lastly, what message of hope or resilience would you like to share with the families of fallen officers or others facing similar losses?
So when you have a loss, it's devastating. Like my husband, he went to work, and then somebody knocked on my door and told me that I was never going to see him again. It's like the rug is pulled out from underneath you. Like I said, I didn't know what day to put the garbage out. I didn't know what to do with so many stupid situations, but somebody came to me and said, I've been where you've been, and you're going to be okay. And I feel that, yes, I do get emotional about my loss when I talk about my husband sometimes, or my children or something like that. But I hope that somebody will see that, all right, my husband's gone 18 years. We've done it. As sad as it is and hard as it is, we've done life. My kids are productive. My kids have gone to college. I just hope that somebody can hear my story and realize whatever you're going through and your initial loss, when it feels like this is the end, like how are we going to go on, that Lisa did it, other people did it, and with the support of Concerns of Police Survivors, you can too. You know, as hard as it is on those hardest days.
Yeah, I have nothing else to add to that. Thank you again. This has been an honor. The microphone is always open to you. I look forward to hearing you talk at future conventions. We get younger and younger in this profession, new delegates, new presidents, and they should hopefully feel even partly how I feel about that first time I heard listening to you talk. And again, being so vulnerable and so raw and just honest about what you've dealt with. This was a treat. Thank you again. And anytime you want to come on and talk or advocate or talk about an upcoming event or tease a conference, the microphone is open to you.
Well, I thank you. And on behalf of all of New Jersey's survivors, we can't thank the state PBA for all they do for us. We appreciate you very, very much.
You're welcome on behalf of President Andreev and Executive Vice President Freeman. That's it for today's episode of Union Strong NJSPBA Voices Podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to follow the podcast and share it with fellow members so we can keep these important stories and updates reaching everyone who needs to hear them. We'll be back soon with more news, interviews, and insights that matter to New Jersey law enforcement. Until next time, stay informed, stay united, stay Union Strong.